Chapter 37. Redemption and the Alley Return. That day in the afternoon, in the lair of the Scarlet Eagles, Marycross, Tony and Gavin entered the room with the metal door that had the eagle painted on it. Once inside, they heard a voice that told them, "Wow, we have here." That voice came from Dan Lizard, who was descending some steps that were attached to a balcony. And on the balcony was the witch Sylvanetia. She looked at the four boys smiling and immediately disappeared. Dissipating, through another door behind them they appeared Vanessa and Suzanne. "I'll leave this to you. I have other things that the mistress has told me about," Vanessa indicated and left. Tony went back to see the girl and told her that they should have a duel. "Wait. Don't worry. Emotions, we will make this more interesting." Dan interrupted, and Lenora appeared through another door, and stood next to Dan. He took out his sword with a guitar grip from his black trench coat, and a huge sharp sword called Fander came out, the last weapon from Dan. "Katie, don't listen to these guys. There is still goodness in you. Listen to us. They haven't taken it away from you yet." Gavin shouted, "Katie, listen to your heart, react." Marycross said distressed, "You fools underestimate our power. Your lack of love for nature bothers me. The one they call no longer exists. It was destroyed. Understand it, Supreme Leader." "Let's finish them off," said Lenora with disdain. "I have a better idea," said Dan, and with his hand he touched his eagle mark, and a spirit Sylvanetia approached Lenora. The witch levitated her above everyone and she began to suffer a very strong headache in her head and mind. "We no longer need you. I have successfully obtained what I wanted. You were good bait and a useful servant, but your power does not compare to ours. I manipulated you. You fell easily. Now get out," Sylvanetia exclaimed as she threw Katie to the other side of the room, where she fell unconscious. "Damn, you're going to pay for that," Gavin shouted furiously. "And what are you going to do?" Dan exclaimed, and the duel began. Dan Lizard, along with Suzanne and another boy named Manny, raised his right arm and showed the mark of the red eagle, where it began to turn redder with a flash. On the ground, where Lenora was, on her arm you could also see how the flash took her arm. That meant that the witch was giving them a lot of power. Dan took out her sword Fander that had the handle of a guitar and cast Electraga against Gavin, Marycross and Tony, followed by the other girl using Reflect to protect her allies through the protective barrier, and the boy named Manny used Nullaga against Gavin so that he unable to use his weapon. Followed by this, Gavin lost his turn by not being able to use his weapon, so Marycross used Disper to eliminate the Nullaga that hit Gavin. Then, Marycross used Reflect to create a protective barrier. Tony used her Goldchakis to attack Manny. Then the Scarlet Eagles girl used Gila to heal Manny's energy and vitality from the impact he had received from Tony. Gavin finally recovered his turn and threw his boomerang with Friezaga in a cyclone of blizzard, doing a lot of damage. To the trio they were facing, the enemy girl again used Nullaga, but the Reflect barrier that Marycross had created returned the attack like a mirror, making herself and her allies unable to use their weapons. However, this did not affect Dan, who dodged the attack, and with his sword he launched a blast of black Bersaka and hit Tony, causing her to be in a berserk state, causing him to begin attacking his own allies such as Gavin and Marycross. Marycross, realizing this, used Statuna and cured Tony of the berserk. Suzanne and Manny regained their turns. The girl used Hilaga to heal both herself and Dan and Manny. Gavin launched a Quarga against Manny in a whirlpool that looked like a large wave of water. Manny counterattacked using Osmosis and Drenny to absorb vitality and magic power. Dan again used Windaga against Gavin. The duel became a back-and-forth scene. Marycross used Disper to eliminate the Drenny and the Osmosis on Gavin. Followed after this, Tony summoned Thor. and the three rivals in front began to attack Thor with magical green flashes from Floriga and fire from Bernaga. While that was happening, the rest of the heroes who were destroying the eagle's lair entered through a door. Scarlets. Angie shouted at Tony that he will remember the strategy that she had told them about with Ganesha to maintain her vitality through self-launching attacks. So Tony saw how Thor was being weakened and ordered him to launch a thunder of Electraga at himself. Tony hoped that Thor's magic power would not be exhausted. To heal his vitality without problems, Suzanne, Dan and Manny were still attacking the summon. Thor was charging his special attack, and after a few minutes, Thor threw his hammer turned into ice against the three rivals in front, and upon impact, millions of ice crystals in the shape of hammers became electric spikes, impacting Dan, Manny and Suzanne, causing these two to lose the duel. Dan had received a lot of damage from the impact, but he managed to heal himself with a potion that he took out of his trenchcoat and began to throw Bernaga with his sword at Thor until he defeated him, since the summoning had run out of vitality. While this was happening, Katie opened her eyes, which no longer had that reddish and yellow color of evil. His eyes were amber again and he stood up. Gavin and Marycross looked at her and said, "Help us, Katie, it's very powerful." Gavin said, "There is still goodness in you. Please help us." Marycross shouted. After this, Angie and Priscilla stared at the scene, where Priscilla asked Angie and Black the following, "What do we do?" To which Angie replies, "Naomi, heal the girl." "What? Are crazy? And she turns against us." Black shouted. The others turned to look at each other's faces. "Naomi, do it. Hilaga, now." Angie exclaimed. Naomi approached Katie and used Hilaga to heal her. "No. You will not do it." Dan shouted as he threw his sword at Naomi and Katie, but Priscilla's quick response avoided the attack. Priscilla said, "Asgard Meteor Extinto," and the dark magic Asterer came out of her spellbook, and some moonrocks fell from the sky to change the course of the sword, preventing it from hitting Naomi. "What the hell was that?" asked Dan. "It's an advanced dark magic. Magicians like her use a particular phrase to cast that magic," said the girl from the Scarlet Eagles on the ground, already out of combat. Alvord took her back with his whip and she threw it against Dan, causing him to catch her, cutting off part of her arm. Naomi finally used Hilaga and managed to heal Katie. She got up, taking redemption and joining the team in the duel. Katie raised her hands and summoned Coco and Cleo. They began to attack Dan with their Frizaga magic. Dan, with his hand that was not injured, took his sword and used Bernaga fire, Electraga electric rays against the others. Marycross used Reflect on the four. Katie ordered Coco and Cleo to use their special attacks, and both creatures attacked Dan with 8 hits from Frizaga. After the impact, Dan tried raise his sword towards the sky, but Gavin with his boomerang used Mitarga cut Fander's sword into pieces, losing all its power. Gavin was going to summon Nikolash, but Katie stopped him and used Holy, with a white flash impacting Dan. Tony, he ended the duel with his martial arts special attack, uppercut, dragon fist, submission, low kick, high kick, karate strike, and throw. There were 6 accurate blows ending Dan in the duel. He stood up and said, "I give up, this is over," and fled the fight with his henchmen using Runaway. After finishing the fight, Gavin approached her friend and hugged her. Marycross did the same with Katie. Tony returned to where the others were. "I'm very sorry for what happened. I didn't want to. They forced me. They took control of my mind. I was weak. I'm sorry. Through evil magic in my mind they presented me with an alternate future that I believed in. They only used me. They took advantage of my abilities." "Excuse me," said Katie with a broken voice. "I forgive you," said Gavin. "Me too, I know you didn't do it," said Marycross. In the back, Roger approached Black and said, "Hey, what do we do now? You don't believe in accepting her into the group after what she did, do you?" "We should think about it," said Black. "Angie, what do you say?" Priscilla asked. "He'll have to earn our trust again," Angie exclaimed, and she walked towards where Katie was on her knees and asked, "Hey, I want you to tell me something, if you remember. Did the witch use you to take over the dark deities? Did she get Omega and Baphomet?" Angie asked while she had her arms crossed. "All I remember is that he took me to different places and made me speak in a strange language. For some reason I also know how to speak it, as I understood. His name is Mo," Katie answered. "To which places?" Black asked. "Town districts. I remember we went to the great cathedral for Omega and Baphomet. Then she whispered, saying that my powers were not powerful enough to take both summons, and we left," said Katie. "I mean, so you gave the dark deities to her?" Tony asked. "No, she wanted to use them for something else, but she didn't tell me why," Katie concluded. "Well, in that case, listen to me. Maybe you have trust in Gavin and Marycross again. If you are assigned to our house in 2 weeks, you will have to earn our trust," said Angie. "You were on the other side. You must tell us everything you know. Only then can we defeat the witch," said Bastian. "I will do whatever you ask me," said Katie. "I'll call Joel to come get us," Alvord said. While Katie approached Naomi and thanked her for healing her, Naomi only raised her pinky finger in approval. In a while the Zeppelin arrived and took everyone to the ranch. Around 5:30 in the afternoon, already at the ranch, everyone said that this was just the preamble to next year. Sylvanetia will manipulate the rival house to attack them again. Katie left the ranch. Marycross returned to her bedroom to continue studying, since next week she had to send her work to be eligible for the 11th year courses. When Katie was in a corner of the neighborhood, very close to the Black home, Gavin came out with his hoodie and called out to her, "Wait. Where are you going?" "I'm going home. I need to send my homework to school next week," said Katie. "You will see that you will gain everyone's trust. You will have your revenge. Before you leave, I want you to have this." "I found it in that place," said Gavin as he handed the golden Pandora to Katie, the last weapon of the summoner. Katie said gratefully, "Now, would you like to walk and see the sunset?" Gavin asked. "Come on," Katie answered, and they both walked under the summer clouds to the hill of yellow flowers. There they observed from above the entire town of Pizcet, together, without anyone bothering them, chatting about what awaited them next year.